In 15 minutes on this, the Sunday before Christmas, Roger Royal will be offering a warm welcome to Wells Cathedral for songs of praise, carols by candlelight. First on BBC One, the news at 6:20 from Moira Stuart.
The headlines this evening: as the weather worsens and hope fades of finding any more earthquake survivors, the Soviet authorities in Armenia order evacuation of the disaster area. The Cornish water poisoning, the families who wait in fear. And why British forces in Germany are being allowed to celebrate Christmas after all. Good evening. Soviet officials have ordered speedier evacuation of the Armenia earthquake survivors. As weather in the disaster areas gets even worse, there's increasing concern for families still living in the open with only tents for shelter. This weekend, one woman, the latest of some 15,000 survivors, was dug out of the ruins of Lenina Khan. But as hopes of finding more run out, the emphasis is turning from rescue to evacuation and reconstruction.
The rush is to get out of Lenina Khan. For those who've lost their homes and all their belongings, buses will take them to Armenia's capital, Yerevan, 80 miles away. There they will seek refuge with friends or relatives. The message from the loudspeaker vans is to leave immediately. But many people are still gathered around fires, awaiting news of relatives and unwilling to go until their bodies have been recovered. This is how they are living throughout the day and throughout the night, surviving on what little bread that's available. Tents have been erected, but they are for the military. There is no shelter for those who have lost their homes. The army then are here in some strength. The roads are full of military vehicles, and they're preparing for the moment when the city can be cleared. Once the evacuation procedure has been completed, several thousand troops will move in here and begin to bulldoze most of what remains of the city. Lenin's statue may survive it all, but even buildings which withstood the vibration have been structurally damaged, and the likelihood is that they will have to be flattened before this city can be rebuilt.
Survivors of the earthquake were among those who lit candles and said prayers for the dead at a special service today in the city that's sacred to Armenian Christians.
A centre of strength, both spiritually and nationally, the Armenian Church is serving as a coordinator of relief supplies, a political negotiator, and as a source of consolation. In the cathedral at Echmiadzin today were those grieving for relatives and those who've been helping in the rescue work. But the congregation was swollen with refugees not only from ruined towns, but from the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh in neighboring Azerbaijan. Their bishop from Baku told me he'd come with 150,000 Armenians in the past few weeks into the earthquake region. Many must have died. Even so, those who survived wouldn't go back, he insisted, though the Soviet authorities want them to return. The international resources of this church and its financial power were reflected in the presence of the Lebanese Patriarch and the American Archbishop. The Catholicos, Supreme Patriarch of all the Armenians, led the prayers for the earthquake victims. The eyes of the Armenian people, even non-believers, are on our church, he said, and we must be a united people. From another church today, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, arriving in Yerevan.
I want to give tender love and care to the people.
She'll be visiting the stricken earthquake towns and villages tomorrow.
A British medical team just back from Armenia has questioned Britain's ability to respond to major international disasters. The South Manchester Accident Rescue Team said that countries such as France had been prepared to send larger teams to the disaster area.
We need to be able, at the press of a button, a single phone call, that an international disaster team will be formed immediately and will have the equipment already prepared to go and will just leave.
Other news, and people in Camelford in North Cornwall say they're increasingly concerned about the long-term effects of drinking polluted water after a chemical blunder in July. The fears have been raised by the publication this weekend of figures showing there was twice as much aluminium sulfate in the water as previously thought. This means that permitted levels were exceeded 6,000 times.
At first, people in the Camelford area suffered nausea, diarrhoea and skin rashes. But now the local GP, who's been carrying out extensive tests, believes there are longer-term problems as well.
Problems of lack of concentration in adults and behavioural difficulties in children, in particular bad-temperedness, disruptive behaviour, being uncooperative.
Almost 6 months on from when the water was polluted, Gina Bond says her family are now suffering constant exhaustion.
Before that, we all seemed to have enough energy to keep us going, but now we seem to get tired very, very early in the evenings. We just want to sit and do nothing.
Wendy Harper, who's suing the Water Authority, says she suffers from severe arthritis and loss of memory.
I never used to suffer from it before, but over the past few weeks I do forget things very easily.
Many people in Camelford fear the full consequences of the water pollution may not be known for years.
Neil Kinnock has again rebuffed calls for the Labour Party to form pacts with other parties. In a television interview today, he expressed his irritation with party members who support the idea. When questioned about proportional representation, Mr Kinnock said he could not subscribe to any version of PR existing at the moment.
Labour's failure to make progress, as shown by last week's by-election in Epping, has brought renewed calls from some of Mr Kinnock's allies for pacts with other parties. Today, the Labour leader accused those allies of insulting the electors.
You can't treat the British electorate as if it was a series of regiments, where the party political generals say, at the command swing, you will vote for another party. I mean, it's ridiculous and it's an insult to the people.
Calls from some shadow cabinet members for a drift to proportional representation met with a guarded response from the leader. He could only accept a version of PR that didn't give disproportionate power to smaller parties. Current forms, he said, were just not acceptable. Mr Kinnock's personal rating in the polls is low. Today, he rejected claims that he just isn't tough enough to be Prime Minister.
Mrs Thatcher is seen as tough, and she keeps on saying how tough she is. My view is, which I think is a rather more grown-up view, is that if you're really tough, you don't have to keep on saying it all the time.
His main appeal was aimed at party members. Do not, he said, pay attention to the self-indulgent defeatists.
Israeli soldiers have shot dead 3 more Palestinians in the occupied territories. It follows the killing of 5 demonstrators last week during some of the most violent incidents this year. 1 Palestinian was shot in the West Bank during an Israeli raid on a village. The other 2 were killed during clashes between soldiers and stone throwers in the Gaza Strip. It means a total of 8 Palestinian deaths since last week's reopening of talks between the PLO and the United States. The PLO chairman, Yasser Arafat, has arrived in Egypt for a meeting with President Mubarak. Britain's junior Foreign Office Minister, William Waldegrave, is also in Cairo. He's been talking to President Mubarak on the chances of a Middle East peace conference and hasn't ruled out the possibility of meetings between Mr Arafat and the British government. The Prime Minister of Greece, Andreas Papandreou, has said that his government will resign if its 1989 budget isn't voted through tonight. The government of Greece has recently suffered a number of scandals and resignations. Mr Papandreou said he sees tonight's decision as a vote of confidence. The full cost to the government of the eggs crisis will become clear tomorrow when the Agriculture Minister, John McGregor, reveals details of the rescue package for poultry farmers. To date, 350 million eggs have been stockpiled, with 15 million more being added every day. And today, the Conservative MP, Sir Richard Boddy, claimed the government had evidence 7 years ago that the country's chickens were seriously infected with salmonella.
Salmonella was very pronounced in the poultry flocks that were examined, and I think this is common knowledge that if you are keeping thousands of birds in one house or hundreds of pigs in one building, or a large number of calves in one building, then there is a risk of salmonella bacteria spreading.
The reward being offered for information about the gang who murdered a man in Surrey on Friday night has been raised to £25,000. The three men are also wanted in connection with a series of violent assaults. Police have praised the quality of the help they've received so far from the public. 6 divers have just finished one of the deepest dives in Britain. They've been underwater for 32 days in an indoor pool in Aberdeen. They went 500 yards down to see if it was possible to work at that depth.
These giant chambers have been home to the 6 divers for more than a month. Their only contact from 1,500 feet down, with voices distorted by the gases they breathe, was through television monitors in the control room.
Started at 7:57.
But the £1 million simulated dive wasn't done to prove that men could survive at that depth. It was designed to find out if they and their equipment could work. In the freezing cold of the water tank, the divers had to perform the sort of intricate repair work the North Sea oil industry demands of them.
You'd be glad to know that you're back on surface.
It took only 3 days to reach 1,500 feet, more than 3 weeks to bring the men back to the surface. Such are the dangers of the decompression sickness, the bends.
We achieved everything we set out to do. We've collected a massive data on how people perform at depth, and we completed the pipeline repair task we set out to do. I'm quite sure that once we've analysed all the data, we'll be able to make some very positive contributions to the improvement of safe diving practice in deep water.
Nice to get out, breathe fresh air again.
Was it a tough mission for you?
Yes, reasonably tough, yeah. A lot tougher than what I expected.
Another dive involving several companies and countries is planned for next summer.
Now football, and Wimbledon have escaped from the First Division's bottom 3 with only their second away win of the season. They beat Nottingham Forest 1-0 with a goal from Laurie Sanchez. In Second Division, there were emphatic victories for Sunderland and West Bromwich Albion. And in the third, Aldershot and Brentford drew, while Gillingham and Notts County won away. The total raised in this year's Christmas appeal by the BBC children's programme Blue Peter has now reached £500,000. The money is being raised in aid projects for the people of Kampuchea. In an interview to be screened on the programme tomorrow, the Prime Minister praises the appeal and makes a contribution of her own.
I think it's marvellous what the children do, and I think it's marvellous what the Blue Peter children have done. You wanted a special, something a little bit special for the auction to add to it. I collect these little paperweights, and they brought out a new one. Last time I think I was on a children's program, it was a badger. This time they brought out a little koala bear, Crown Derby koala bear. Now, it's Australia, but that's one of the nearest countries I've been to Kampuchea, and perhaps someone would like to buy that.
British soldiers on the Rhine have been paid compensation after being told to cancel some of their Christmas parties. The Germans had asked them to suspend celebrations as a mark of respect for the 7 people who died 10 days ago in a military plane crash. The 55,000 servicemen in West Germany heard of the ban, which ended on Thursday, from the Armed Forces Minister Archie Hamilton on Forces Television. And they've now been told the cost of cancelling the parties, about £500,000, will be paid by the Ministry of Defence. A spokesman said that Mr Hamilton was aware of the sacrifices made by servicemen. The £500,000 would cover cancellation fees for party premises and entertainments. And that's it for now. The main news tonight is at 5 to 9.
Hello, for many of you I can promise you a very different sort of week. Windy, unsettled, gradually becoming a bit colder as well. This front here is going to give many parts of the south the first real rain they've had for weeks and weeks. It's going to move rather quickly southwards in the next 12 hours. Then a little wriggle is going to slow it up over southern districts, but lots of isobars on the charts tomorrow, so lots of wind around, and that's the theme for the next few days. There's the rain on the radar just an hour ago, coming southwards across southern Scotland into Northern Ireland and northern parts of England. It's coming pretty steadily southwards. Some of it's quite heavy too, soon getting into northern parts of England and Wales, soon clearing away from the Forth and Clyde Valley. To the north of it, squally showers, hail and thunder in a few places in the north and west. To the south of it, a dry but cloudy, mild start to the night. By the end of the night, that rain getting right down into southern parts of Britain, clearing up from the North Midlands and North Wales northwards, but there will be showers still in the north and west. No frost anywhere, but gale force gusts in places. There have been gusts to gale force in the north this evening. Tomorrow, that band of rain hanging about in the south in the morning, but clearing away off from all but the far southwest and parts of central southern England. Again, showers mainly in the north and west. The best of the sunshine, eastern Scotland and eastern England. Temperatures not too good, but becoming cooler from the north. A summary of that.
In the Money programme just starting over on 2, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nigel Lawson, talks about his handling of the economy.
The Sunday before Christmas bursts into song with carols by candlelight from Wells Cathedral. At 7:15, feature film Time Travel in the Philadelphia experiment.
Somehow the electromagnetic fields created in 2 experiments, one in 1943 and the other now, cross-connected. They created a vortex, a hole in the space-time continuum.
At 9:10, the final episode of D.H. Lawrence's The Rainbow, and Anton returns.
But do you love me?
Yes. At 10:10, every man visits Father Christmas to find Santa Claus. The jolly bearded chap emerged in a 19th century poem, but he's apparent through hundreds of years of legend. At 10:50, tonight's show jumping, horses big and small from Olympia, ending Sunday night on BBC One.
And now on 1, Roger Royal introduces Britain's top 10 carols in Songs of Praise.